YouTube frogs, Phainon is finally here and he is ready to rain juicy meteors on your enemies with some incredible animation power creep. In this video, we'll be going over everything you need to know about Phainon in a digestible fashion and showcasing his power at E0. This is going to be done on the creator experience server, and of course, that means that things are subject to change for full release, so keep that in mind. Let's start off with a full guide on how Phainon works. So, Phainon is our newest installment of Destruction Path characters, deviating a bit from our usual Remembrance lineup. No memo sprites to worry about when it comes to him, but he does have a whole new host of mechanics to watch out for. First off, the basics. He's physical typing, and scales normally off of attack and crit stats. His raw multipliers are very high, and he has a mixture of blast and AoE in his attacks. His ultimate is completely unique. This ring is called Core Flame, and once he has all 12 lit up, he can activate his ultimate. Upon activation, he will literally summon a domain expansion, separating himself from the rest of his team so that he himself can one-man army the fight. The AV bar has unique additions for Phainon's transformation, and he gains a whole host of new abilities. His main damage ability will be his E, which is that big meteor move, with his Q and W responsible for gaining charges so that he can actually use his E. He'll cycle through these abilities until his final turn. On this turn, he'll initiate a final attack that deals damage to all enemies before reverting back to base form. Rinse and repeat, getting his ultimate ring back online, and he can transform again. Overall, Phainon brings a whole new meaning to HYPERCARRY, completely isolating himself from the rest of the team to take on all the enemies by himself, which also includes a whole host of new mechanics that allows Phainon to deal insane damage with a unique range of supports. Initial impression of this design may raise some questions about, well, how buffs will work on him, how is the skill point management, and what teammates to use, especially considering they aren't even present for when he's doing all his damage. So let's break down exactly what he does. When you first check him out in combat, you'll notice a couple of immediate things. What is going on with that ultimate ring? So this is described in his talent called Core Flame. Reach 12 Core Flame and he can activate his ult. He can store up to 15 Core Flame, the excess of which will be refunded after his ult finishes. This is mechanically similar to Acheron's excess ult stacks that are refunded to her after ult. He gains Core Flame from anyone, ally or enemy, targeting him with any ability. So allies targeting him with a buff or heals give him a stack, and enemies targeting him with single target or AoE or blast attacks also give him a stack. If any ally targets him, he'll gain 30% crit damage for 2 turns. Core Flame can also be gained in 2 more ways besides targeted abilities from his Trace passive. A2 grants 1 at the start of battle and 3 post ult, and A4 converts receiving an energy ability into 1 extra Core Flame. This means that Ting Yun's ult and Sunday's ult provide 2 Core Flame instead of 1, so as to not waste the value of those abilities. If you activate his technique beforehand, he unfortunately does not get any Core Flame points, but he does regenerate 25 energy for all allies, add 1 skill point to the team, and gain 2 of these charges that will be used when he's ulting. You'll also notice that with Phainon in the team, your max technique points increases to 8 from 5, and he also consumes 2 technique points when he uses his ability. His technique is very similar to Acheron. It deletes normal enemies in sort of AoE fashion. It will also not consume points if it doesn't hit anything, so you don't have to worry about wasting it by spamming it. In battle, Phainon's setup is pretty straightforward, but can also be skill point front loaded. Constantly applying abilities on him, like buffs or heals, usually requires skill point usage, so managing his skill points in these situations will be crucial to his success. When it's his turn, using his E will do blast damage and generate 2 points of Core Flame. His basic attack in Phainon form will ideally never be used because it essentially wastes his turn and doesn't really do anything. Once he's got 12 plus Core Flame, he is ready to ult. Domain expanding brings a whole host of special mechanics that only exist in his ult state. First, his domain expansion is his territory. All other teammates become temporarily benched but are still alive. They just won't be able to do anything during the duration of his ult. All enemies in the domain expansion gain physical weakness. Phainon now has 8 extra special turns, all contained within a fixed speed calculated off of his base speed, and you can see them all in the action order. This means that any external sources of speed from relics, substats, or buffs do not grant turnover value for these extra turns. With the central icon, it looks like all 8 of those extra turns complete within 157 action value, which is more than 1 cycle in the MOC. These 8 extra special turns are not considered Phainon's turn, so therefore all buffs that existed on Phainon prior to him transforming transforming will remain on him during the entire duration of these attacks. So, you know that Bronya's E that only lasts for one turn? Well, using it properly right before Phainon's ult, and now he's got that juicy buff for all 8 of Phainon's extra turns. This takes HYPERCARRY to the next level. We want to make sure all buffs are properly stacked on him before he transforms. Now that he's literally a one-man army, he gets some stats to compensate. So the talent describes this in detail. Phainon is completely immune to CC. He'll gain 80% attack, he'll gain 270% max HP, and he'll restore 20% max HP after attacking. This is important for sustain. And if he were to die in this form, he instead doesn't. Lamau, and deals an early big boom and reverts back to original form. Once it ends, teammates gain 15% speed to help prep his next ult. Okay, so back to Phainon's ult details. He's a big man, he's got big HP bar, he's got huge attack, and he's got big abilities. He's got 3 new abilities now and 3 tooltip numbers that tell you 3 different things. The big tooltip number, this is the turns left on his ultimate. It'll start at 7 and go down to 0. Next is by his E. This is his Scourge or Bruise stacks, and he'll start with 4 by default, or 6 if the technique was used. You can consume 4 to use his big E move, which is the big meteor from the sky to smush enemies. The E first dispel debuffs from him just to make sure he can do optimal damage, and then deals massive bounce damage to all enemies. So, based off of the text, it technically hits all enemies, but it's bounced so it doesn't waste a lot of damage on trash mobs if they die early. His other 2 abilities, Q and W, are different ways for him to gain E charges. Q is going to be in the basic attack, and this is the standard blast attack. Its multipliers are here, and it will always grant 2 E charges. His W is going to be a unique counter ability that's described in his skill that advances all enemies so that they can attack him. This also uses that last tooltip number, that's the little flame thing. While it's active, he gains 75% damage reduction and +1 flame thing after enemies either attack or take an additional action. Once he's done, he counters with AoE damage and bounce and deals extra final damage depending on the flame stacks. Each stack will give 20% final damage to his counter. And most importantly, in the beginning here, a W will give him extra E charges based on the number of enemies present. So 4 enemies is 4 charges, which is basically 1 full E move. Basically, you should use W if 3 or more enemies, and Q if there's only 1 enemy, and either Q or W if there's 2 enemies. This way, Phainon will always get minimum 2 E charges per turn, which is half of the amount you need to consume for his big meteor. So yeah, you'll basically just cycle Q and W to gain charges for E. You also don't have to immediately use E when you get 4 charges. He stores up to 7, so you can't hold it for too long. You can also use E as long as you have at least 1 charge, which will be useful if it's his last turn before the final hit and you don't have 4 charges. But there's a little bit nuance to optimizing his E. In general, just make sure you don't dump it on like a 1 HP trash mob like autoplay would. Once he's out of turns, he'll proc a final hit and deal damage distributed evenly across all enemies. It is technically true AoE, but it won't be wasted if there's only 1 enemy. After that, Phainon's ult ends and he'll need to get Core Flame again. Yeah, so overall, he's got a big amount of text in his kit that describes his multipliers in both forms and extra special mechanics, but he's actually a pretty simple character to play once you do a couple runs. All it comes down to, you press buttons that give stuff to Phainon, then he does domain expansion when buff stacking is complete and core flame is satisfied, then he rains meteors on enemies, and you profit. Now for some extra trace and stat nodes and talent priority. A6 trace is the last one we didn't cover. This is free 50% attack that can stack up to twice. No turn duration, it just exists. The first ult will only be 50% attack, but the second ult and beyond will be 100% attack. And then his stat nodes provide him 5 speed, 12% crit rate, and 37.3% crit damage, if I'm not mistaken, which is from all of those nodes. It's actually kind of a ridiculous amount of crit damage, to be honest. Never expected to be that insane. And then for talent priority, skill greater than or equal to talent, over basic, greater than or equal to ult. Skill is going to be number 1 because this contains his W taunt, and also his E meteors have their multipliers here. Talent gives him crit damage here, and also has scaling of the attack percent from the transformation, which are both important. And the basic is just for Phainon's Q, which you will be using for each artist against single or duo enemy lineups. Ultimate just has the multiplier for his final hit, and it's only used once per rotation. On average, I would expect ultimate and basic to be pretty close in value, but it'll vary depending on the enemy account, because the enemy account determines if you're using Q or W to charge his E. Remember though, Phainon is a hyper carry, so technically you should max out everything. All right, so now let's talk about his Eidolons and if there's anything crazy going on in the first 2. E1, quite an important speed ratio increase for Phainon's turn orders. Base becomes 66% ratio instead of 60% and can scale to 84% depending on enemies defeated in that same battle. 12 defeated enemies are needed to cap out 84% at 1.5% per stack, which is completely doable amount. Crit damage also increases by 50% in ult state lasting for 3 turns, providing a raw damage increase. Now expect this Eidolon to be stronger on Phainon's second transformation. The first will likely receive max only about 4 to 6 of those stacks, which will still increase this ratio to about 72 to 75% 80% of base speed, but to get the 84%, you probably need to wait for the second one. Now, the following are the action value changes that you can expect at different stacks, and this is probably the most important part for those that are considering between E1 and S1. So, the signature light cone versus non-signature light cone is the most valuable from this comparison because it compares, like we said, E1 versus S1 in terms of action value priority. You obviously won't get the offensive stats of the light cone going E1, but the action value conversion can approach and exceed the base speed increase from the LC at about 1 or 2 stacks or higher. Overall, E1 may allow you to squeeze the full ult's extra turns within the 0th cycle of MOC, assuming a couple of trash mob kills during setup to push the inherited AV below 140. Besides that, do what you will with this information. It's all in there. If you can get 12 stacks really early on, then his AV conversion is going to be insane at E1. E2, Phainon gains 20% Fizz Res Pen, and after using his big E, Phainon will also gain +1 extra turn. Unsure if this is an action advance as well. It would be nice quality of life if it is, but if there's no action advance, then it just extends his ult duration with more turns, which is still really valuable, but doesn't steal action value with the turn advance. E3, E5 are trace levels. E4, this buffs his W by an extra 4 flame stacks, which is basically just an increase in damage. Nothing really significant when it comes to gameplay, and there's no charge increase for his E. And then E6. So, 6 Core Flame on start, and Core Flame no longer has an upper limit, meaning his ult usage time can be delayed for exactly the proper buffs and very likely initiated back to back. The big E move now also deals extra 36% true damage on the highest HP enemy. Basically, E6 is a massive damage enhancement to the highest HP target and more front-loaded ultimate uptime, especially the first 2. Overall, Phainon's Eidolons are pretty normal raw damage improvements with a pretty impactful change to his fixed speed ult playstyle at E1. Personally, I think his Eidolon scaling is not the most impressive beyond that, but it depends on the value of those extra turns from E2 and the front-loaded ult points in E6. Now let's get into his light cones. Alright, so for Phainon, there's actually some unfortunate news when it comes to light cones. Phainon's ult fixed speed is very specific to base speed, and Phainon's signature light cone is the only destruction light cone to provide a base speed increase. You can visually see this. First, right now, he is 106 base speed. If I switch this off to something, for example, like Clara's light cone, now he's only 94 base speed. So it's actually pretty significant here. So this is mainly for his extra turn action value usage, which if he's 94 base speed, it's 177 AV. If he's 106 with the signature, it's 157 AV. This is to complete all 8 of his extra turns. This is pretty significant because it is basically 20 action value difference. His light cone, as you guys can see here, also has the highest base attack among destruction LCs, which makes all forms of attack percent value significantly more powerful with it. And he also gains defense ignore, which is classic, and 60% damage bonus in ult transformation. This light cone is definitely quite loaded for him and will be a major upgrade over anything else you can obtain for him, mostly because of that base speed. All right, so what else do we have? We basically just have raw stat increases, which are fine. So the 5-star ones, we have Sabers from the Fate collab. If you somehow have an extra one that she's not using, this provides raw crit damage and one of the 2 40% attack buffs. He's not going to get the second one. We also have Fall of an Eon. This is raw attack percent and damage percent conditionally. It's totally fine to use. We have Clara's Something Irreplaceable. This is raw attack percent and damage percent that is actually always active. It says until their next turn. It will apply for all 8 of Phainon's ult turns. And then we have 4-star options. We have a Trail of Bygone Blood. This is raw crit rate and raw skill damage, which is really nice. We have Nowhere to Run, which is just raw attack percent. And then we have a Secret Vow, which is raw damage percent and conditional damage percent, which should sometimes happen. Phainon will have quite a beefy amount of HP, so take that into account. In general though, I would stick to any of the 5-star stat sticks that include Sabers, Eon, or Irreplaceable, Signature obviously, or I would do Bygone Blood for the 4-star. All right, on to relics. So Phainon's a pretty general attack scaler with primarily skill damage, so he has some flexible options. Best in slot is going to be Wave Strider 4-piece. This is 16% crit damage and 48% attack, both active during the entirety of his ultimate. Second place, we have a Scholar 4-piece, which will be 8% crit rate and 20 to 45% skill damage. And then last ult, if you randomly have it, the old school Champion 4-piece for 10% fizz and 25% attack still does work. And then generic 2-piece sets for attack percent, crit percent, and damage percent. For planners, we have the newest Arcadia set will be best in slot. You get 36% damage if the conditions are properly met. Phainon will be removing 3 allies during his ultimate, so he'll be obtaining the missing ally buff for 12% on 3 stacks. Alternative is going to be Rudolin Arena for 8% crit rate and 20 skill damage. For main stats, he basically has one main build because he has no ERR and some alternatives depending on your preferred playstyle. Crit rate over crit damage body, attack or speed boots, damage over attack orb, and attack row. In very rare circumstances, you can run that crit damage body piece, but you should usually aim for 80% or higher crit rate, and that's probably going to be using a crit rate body. Sunday pairings will cap at 80% crit rate. With no Sunday, you'll want higher, maybe about 90%. He has tremendous amounts of extra crit damage from external sources, so prioritize capped crit rate on his relics. Attack boots is generally preferred, but speed boots can be used on a speed tuned team. This would involve above a 134 speed Phainon and +1 speed over supports like Bronya and Sunday. This enables an extra first turn E for a +2 core flame before action advance supports provide him another turn. Again, this is not necessary, but it's an available option for those who enjoy speed tuned teams. The overall damage difference between attack or speed boots is pretty minimal, as it's just a trade-off between a slightly faster ult versus slightly higher damage cap. Team comps. So Phainon definitely brings back some rusty old classics into the playing field because he operates differently than what recent supports tend to provide. Because Tribby does not have any targetable abilities, for the first time, she will not be the best in slot support for him. Kind of bittersweet, huh? We want teammates that ideally target him with something like a heal or a buff or an action advance to help him get core flame as fast as possible, while also granting him a bunch of stats. Energy funnelers also get extra core flame value with his trace passive, so that's a plus. We can also include buffs that are incredibly strong but have short turn duration because Phainon can abuse full value of any buffs that are applied to him during ult state. So in total, he has quite a few options that could fit his team comp, and it's really down to what you have in your playstyle preference. Action advancers are going to include Sunday, Bronya, Robin, RMC, and Sparkle. Sunday and Bronya are higher priority with their spammable action advance. Robin and RMC are more alternatives if you don't have the others. And Sparkle is good, but her 50% action advance can be unreliable sometimes. For energy funnelers, we have Sunday, Huohuo, and Tingyun. Sunday double dips into energy as well as action advance. Huohuo is a super valuable sustain here, and Tingyun is an old school classic with a targetable skill and energy on ult. Since we're going to be having a metric ton of attack, damage, and crit buffs, ideal other support options prioritize vulnerability percent, res penetration, and true damage. These are pretty classic. These characters may or may not have targetable abilities, so their team synergy priority will be lower than the ones that do. These include Ruan Mei, Cypher, and Tribby. You can still totally run them, but prioritize the action advancers and energy generators along with some sustain if you need it. Also, refrain from including the following characters because they don't actually have a targetable ability to help Phainon. These include Pella, Jiaoqiu, and Yukong. For sustain, Huohuo will remain the strongest option, but any sustain with a targetable heal will perform perfectly fine. Gallagher remains the strongest 4-star option with his targetable heal. So, the main classic team for Phainon might look like the following. If you're doing premium sustain with 5-star lineup, we have Phainon plus Sunday plus Huohuo, and either Bronya, RMC, or Robin. If we're doing sustain free to play, it's going to be Phainon plus Tingyun plus Gallagher plus either RMC or Bronya if you have her. And then for Sustainless, we have Phainon plus Sunday plus Tribby and either Bronya, Ruan Mei, or Robin. In general, there's quite a lot of flexibility with this team support synergies. Whatever you have available will probably be useful as long as they buff attack scalers. And finally, is he recommended to pull? With his fixed speed ultimate, I think it will be a mixed bag for your playstyle preference. His LC is very signature skewed, so if you can't guarantee his LC, it'll be a lot harder to invest in him. His team comps are probably the most F2P friendly because he can basically use most supports and sustains in the game. His raw multipliers are also exceptionally high, so he'll be dealing massive damage even without optimal supports. If you also like flashy combat and animations, he's definitely a huge plus in that department. Insane visual effects for his entire kit. Overall, I think if you are okay with his fixed speed ult design and also can guarantee his light cone, then he's definitely very satisfying. All right, let's get into some quick showcases. So I've got 3 showcases for you guys today, a little more than usual because his clears are pretty fast, and also to show you guys the damage difference with different comps. We're gonna start with the F2P-S comp, which is shown right here. Phainon, Gallagher, Bronya, and Tingyun. Then I'll do a premium team with sustain showcase, and finally a showcase with no sustain but premium characters. All 5 stars that are used are going to be E0S1, and all 4 stars are going to be E6. You'll notice that my placement of characters is slightly different. I've opted to put Tingyun in the 4th slot because even though we have Destruction slot 1 and Abundance slot 2, my god, she randomly gets targeted all the time and just dies. So Yeah, also, I'll be using attack boots Phainon to show you guys casual no speed tomb team showcases. Anyways, let's go. Alright, so in the F2P showcase, we've got 2 passives and 2 active abilities. I'm gonna lead with Tingyun, Bronya, and Phainon. I'm gonna skip Gallagher. Alright, pretty straightforward lead here. Tingyun ulti onto Phainon. Into Tingyun's E onto Phainon as well. Into Gallagher E for that +1 stack. Do an immediate ult to get the Posada debuff. That will last during the duration of Phainon's ult. Alright, so we're gonna Bronya basic attack here. The reason is because her E needs to be the last ability that we use. And if we basic attack, we can action forward her just a little bit. So now we have 9 and 10 stacks. So now we can Bronya ult into Bronya E after Tingyun just autos. So this is pretty standard setup here. Bronya's E is going to be the last ability we have because it is only 1 turn duration. And I'm going to use Phainon's E right before I press his ult to get that extra +2. And also we maintain all buffs, so don't worry about that. So we are fully buffed now. Run that E down. Big 925k. I think both of the ads are dead here. Alright, beautiful. Okay, we're going to go ahead and I believe I choose... Okay, I choose the basic attack here. I think we noticed that the left mob had more HP, so we want to basically equalize their HP so that we can kill them as soon as possible. Alright, beautiful. Insane damage there. Now we have 4 stacks. I think I choose to do W here, and the reason why I'm choosing to use W is because I want to action forward them as much as possible so that Svarog summons his robotic hand. And this also means that the enemies go through their turn orders a little bit faster, which saves my team from getting like randomly CC'd and stuff. So we're gonna choose to do W basically every single time and counter every single time as well. Svarog is gonna summon his hand as expected. And now that we have 4 charges, we're gonna use an E after this. Since we're immune to CC, the robotic hand doesn't actually do anything. Beautiful. Now we can W here, and we W for 3 charges, which is really nice because the hand's still alive. Unfortunately, we don't get any value out of it because it is our 0th turn, which means that we're going to do our final hit here. But I do believe that this kills the hand, which means that my team does not have to worry about the CC. So now we're going to set up again. Since we did E right before our ult initially, one of our passive talents gives us +3, and then we have +2 from the funnel. So now we're at +6. +7, and we already have Tingyun's benediction buff, so I'm just gonna ult into Phainon and then basic here because we still have the buff maintained. And then Bronya is actually perfect here. He's going next, and we have an E into an ult combo into Phainon. Alright, beautiful, getting all the buffs available. Bronya is the last one available. I'm gonna choose to Phainon E right before his ult again. This is for maximum core flame. So now we're at 14. We use 12 and we save 2 for next time, which we might not need, but we'll see. Also, this is an interesting thing. You guys notice I'm at 7 out of 4, and that means that Phainon's E charges carry over between his return state. Quite nice. Alright, so now we're at 5. I'm gonna do an E again. This is a bounce ability, so don't worry about the right mob having like 1 HP. It'll still be mostly on Svarog. Alright, Q. Gonna do a Q again. And then we have 5 stacks. We're gonna go ahead and E here. Alright, and then the final hit should be enough to kill him at 7%. So now we're just waiting. He's at full HP. He will not die here. And his final hit. And there it is. Pretty solid. That is going to be a 2-cycle clear from F2P Showcase with a really insane wave 1 and a wave 2 that's pretty optimal. So yeah, pretty good there. All right, now on to premium sustain. We're using Huohuo and Sunday instead of Tingyun and Gallagher here. Huohuo and Sunday are both energy funnelers, so you're gonna notice that Phainon's core flame increase is gonna be very fast compared to before. We have a lot of ways to increase it to 12 here. I'm gonna choose to, I think I choose to Bronya E here. Okay, so I choose to Bronya E because I noticed that I'm probably going to have a lot of extra skill points, and we're going to basically spam Phainon's ult so that he goes right away. Because we have every ability available. We have Huohuo E into Huohuo ult, into Bronya ult. So we're having an extra, additional 6 core flame. So I'm not going to rely on Bronya's E this time. I want to initiate this right away. So we're doing this as optimally as I can, because we're getting energy back into all my teammates. Sunday's gonna E. He's already at 10 core flame. You guys notice how fast it is. It's like an instant ult. So Sunday's gonna E, and we're just gonna send it after an E here. So 13 core flame with his E, and then we ult. So we are skipping Bronya's E. We are gonna be losing quite a significant damage. So compared to the F2P Showcase, you might notice the damage is like relatively similar, and that's expected because we did not perfectly buff stack here. We wanted Phainon's ult to run as fast as possible. But this is all good though, because now there are 4 enemies on field, and we get a massive W for 4 additional E charges. And now we just wait. Gonna get that that flame counter bottom there. Soul Scorch is what it's called. I call it flame thingy, but yeah. All right, counters. Now we got a big E coming. 912,000. Both the ads are dead. He has 2 additional charges. And notice that the HP is super low. We're able to 0 cycle the first wave by blast attacking with the Q, and now on to wave 2. So this is like literally the ideal start. We rush his ult, and we manage to kill the mobs before the cycle finishes. All right, so same order of deal here. Once we have 4 stacks, we use E. Otherwise, we use W. We want to push their attack patterns as soon as possible. We are immune to CC. Doesn't matter what they do, we're gonna be okay. All right, there's our counter. 218k. We're gonna go ahead and E here, and the reason why is because we only have 1 turn left, so there's no point in doing Q or W. So we're at a weak E is still extra damage, and then his ult, and then we're at 4 core flame, and we have 3 skill points. All right, so hopefully, okay, I Sunday ult here because I'm scared of the robotic hand grabbing Sunday. This at least guarantees the buff, and there it is. Perfect timing here. Perfect timing. You notice we have 8 core flame, so we can Bronya E into Bronya ult. That'll be 9 into 10, and then Phainon E into ult. So this is really, really fast rotation, and with all the energy funneling, this is ideal. If we did not Sunday ult here, by the way, we would be at 8 core flame, so we wouldn't be able to do this. So it's perfect. And then we enter it. So this is why the energy funnelers are like massive value, because they don't necessarily commit skill points, and you get his core flame up super fast. There it is, 1.5 million damage. Very nice, as we have Bronya E this time. And now since there's only 1 enemy left, we are going to Q blast every single time for the guaranteed 2 stacks. And that's basically it. We just Q again, get 4 charges, and then we're gonna keep cycling the E here. Let's see how close we are here. Ooh, we actually did it. Just under a 2 cycle clear, which means this is a 1 cycle clear, this is ideal. Ideal 1 cycle clear with the premium sustain team. Very beautiful, very nice. All right, we are back for the final showcase. We're going Sustainless, and we're bringing in Tribby. Tribby's gonna provide a vulnerability percent and res pen, which is quite insane here considering we have double action advance. We have full damage here. Let's go. Alright, so first up, I'm gonna get Tribby's ult up so we get both buffs online, aura buffs online. Alright, so here we have double action advancer, and it does cost a tremendous amount of skill points, but it will increase Phainon's core flame by quite a lot. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. Go ahead and buff him. Also making him beatified. I'm gonna wait for Bronya's ult. Okay, Phainon is 8. This is gonna be 10 stacks. Now we just wait for Bronya. It's fine. We already got Sunday's buffs up. Just basic here. Okay, my whole team is CC'd. It is what it is, though. Let's finally do this. And let's go. Looking at our stat distribution, we've got 20 buffs online now. We are 101, 489.9, 312% damage amp, and nearly 6k attack, I think. A lot of stuff going on. You can see that Tribby's stuff is still online. So let's do an E here. Yeah, I mean, the damage is definitely there. So I think that we did fail to 0 cycle here. I think if I Bronya autoed, we would be able to 0 cycle here. So I'm gonna go ahead and reset and try this one more time. All right, so going for a 0-turn wave 1, I am gonna need a Bronya auto attack here. Bronya auto attack will advance her attack, her action a little bit forward, so her second one is faster. Okay, so auto attack here. Phainon E. Phainon ult. Now we're at 6 stacks because of that energy funneling. Phainon's 8 stacks. Okay, we're really good as long as Bronya gets ult. 9. Okay, we're perfect here. Okay, Trivy's gonna basic. Okay, Bronya's gonna E. Beautiful. Okay, now we have full buffs. Phainon's gonna go here into ult. Alright, let's go. Send an E. There we go. Beautiful. Ooh, I think we... Yeah, and there it is. They're all dead. Insanely gorgeous there. Okay, so since I have 2 moves here, I'm going to go ahead and do a Q into a W. The reason why I'm going to do this is because I can hold this a little bit. This will also give me a good counter here. So I'm 6 out of 4. Five charges. Counter that. 400k. Let's do E on these guys. Woo! Look at that juicy damage. Very, very nice. Very, very nice damage. Okay, so we only have 2 turns left. There's no choice. I have to E here. 24%. It's close. I don't know if we can do it though. Oh, we can't. And this is one of the problems. His fixed turn, waiting for his final hit from the ult is going to be after the first cycle. Unfortunate. Very unfortunate here. But it's super close. And there it is. It was close. I mean, it's basically as close as you're gonna get to a 0 cycle with him because it's really down to his fixed speed extra turns. We can't really push that final hit any closer than that. You would have to ult a lot faster, which as you guys can see, he probably could have if I did not go with Bronya's E. But not having Bronya's E damage amp will probably not give us the damage to kill the first wave or the second wave. So yeah, it is a trade-off that you're gonna have to do. All right, so as you guys can see, each of the showcases was fairly close. F2P, we did 2 cycle, I believe. Sustain, we did just under 2 cycle for a 1 cycle. And then for Sustainless, we barely were the cutoff. We could have maybe gotten 0 cycle, but again, the fixed speed makes it really difficult to do that if you're relying on his final hit. But overall, he is pretty dang strong. His multipliers are insane. And he has a lot of options. You might have noticed actually that I like using Bronya with Phainon a lot. In each of the teams, I chose to use Bronya. Bronya is a standard character. Most of you guys should be able to have at least 1 Bronya. That was an E0 S1 Bronya with her standard Lycone. So yeah, I prefer it because I feel like her E is a very strong 1-turn buff. And basically only Phainon is going to ever be able to use that properly. She's a support that I feel like most people have kind of like benched essentially. And I think for Phainon, she works really well because she's really strong buffs for him and he can utilize them because all those 8 turns are going to get that. So yeah, let me know what you guys think of Phainon in the comments below, whether you guys like him, what you guys think about his fixed speed stuff, because I think that's one massive downside on him is the fact that his ultimate and all those extra turns is based off of 60% of his base speed, which is fairly slow. It's not going to be within 1 cycle, and that is just the reality of it. Overall, let me know. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and look forward to more guides for HSR for the upcoming characters, especially the fake characters. Anyways, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.